Hey, what's going on everyone? This is Mike Kollin at MikeKollin.com. Okay, so this video, it's going to be out of, I don't know how to explain this, it's going to be a bunch of different pieces put together. I'm going to start kind of rough and rumble through it, and I think as usual it should smooth out towards the end. If you're a religious person, this video may shock you, as this is very much a spiritual channel. Okay, so let me start it off here, then I'll get into some Jesus stuff. So I was at the, and I don't know why I didn't take a video of this, I was up at the Golden Gate Bridge. This is about, I think, 10 days ago, a week ago, and there's, saw these two really beautiful girls, and they were probably in their mid-20s, and they're with their mom and their, the mom's brother, but he looked really young, so he was much younger than the mom. Anyways, they were drawn over towards me. I was with the coffee guy with the coffee machine in his truck, etc. And they just walked right over and they're smiling and smiling. I said, hello, and we started to talk, and I said, are you guys from Tibet? I just had a really kind of strong feeling that's the part of the world they were from. They said, no, we're from Nepal. Well, Tibet is on the border of Nepal, so they are very similar people, and they had that look. But the one thing about the two girls is they almost had a light. It was at nighttime. The Golden Gate Bridge is kind of dark, and a lot of people out there, but they had such a bright light about them. Okay, by the way, the music is going to go down in about 10 seconds. So these two girls were really cute, and we had a connection. It was really nice. Probably will never see them again unless it's meant to be. We made no, didn't exchange numbers, nothing like that. But I do wish I would have kept in touch with the family. That would have been a good thing. Now, the reason why I bring them up is they asked me a question. And that question was, okay, so we started talking, and I just had a really strong feeling like, yeah, they're not from the country, but they spoke really good English. And I asked them where they're from. They said, oh, we're from Nepal. I said, oh, so you're Buddhist? They're like, yeah. And we started talking about, they go, are you Buddhist? I'm like, because I had my bracelet on Buddha Chandi gave me. And I said, well, it's kind of a tough question to answer. And the brother was like, well, and he started testing me. Asking me religious questions.
I hope you guys can see he's right in front of me.
So you won't get too far asking me religious questions. And it was really because when I finally went to temple, I saw something that really stood out, that really made me realize, oh, I'm not a religious person at all. Alright, so here's how it started for me. I went through my awakening when I was 28, and I was going to like Sikh temple, and then this Japanese Buddhist temple in San Francisco. Very left-brained, rule-oriented, by the way. Because that's a very Japanese style, whereas if you go to Laos or Thailand, it's very right-brained, very open, very relaxed, very comfortable. Okay, because it's more of the spiritual brain versus following the rules. So when I was younger, I was a very rule-oriented person, very disciplined. And what happened was, when I went through that last 2 weeks of meditating every day, I didn't eat for 14 days. And I broke, and I just gave up and I quit. And really what it was is I let go of the rules, I let go of the structure, I let go of the organization, which is all left brain. And essentially what I did by letting go is I finally opened up to my right brain fully and completely, and I became fully conscious. So religious people essentially are having to follow rules because they're in their left brain. They don't know any other way. It's like, think of it as a level. When you're at that level, it's like, well, that's all you know. That's all that makes sense to you. So you're like, well, what are the rules for this religion? My religion is better than your religion. That whole argument, the minute someone brings it up, I'm like, oh, they're not awake. They're still stuck in their left brain. So essentially, here's how it works. You will suffer tremendously until you finally let go. And when you let go is when you finally awaken completely. You were just completely in the present moment. You're very aware, you're very conscious, but it's without trying. If you're trying to be aware, it doesn't work that way. It's like a helium balloon. You're holding onto the string. The minute you let go, it floats up all, listen closely, all by itself. You don't do anything. And the minute you get to that point, that's when you expand. That's when you awaken. See, when you try to awaken, when you try to be conscious, how to explain this? You tighten it up, and thus it makes you more narrow. It's all about letting go. It literally, if I could say, if there was one reason why we came here, it was to let go. So when I teach this to people, in the beginning, I can use my energy while they're doing these techniques to get them to pop open. Like, whoa, this is so cool. And then the next day they try really hard, and what the equivalent is like this. Okay, so my door opens inwards. But let's say the person's pushing, and I actually make my clients go, okay, walk up to the front door, push on it. And I go, what's going on? They're like, well, it won't open. I'm like, that's because it opens inwards, not outwards. That's why Jesus said, look within. So the really cool thing about my door is when it's open, when you let go of the door, it slowly opens up by itself because it's on a slight angle. And so if you try to meditate, it's all about letting go. So when a thought comes up, let it go. Allow it to be. So their brother was asking me all these, he was like saying, oh, do you know about the 10,000 Buddha statues up in Ukiah? I'm like, nope, don't know nothing about it. I could tell by the way he was kind of firing questions at me. He was trying to prove that I wasn't Buddhist. And I was already trying to answer the question that, well, no. God, how to explain this? I don't consider myself religious at all. If someone said, well, what is your religion? If I had to say it, it's like, oh, it's Christian Buddhist. So one thing I noticed over the years is some monks, the minute I would walk in the temple, they would be like, whoa, like this guy's really spiritual. Like they would see it right away. And then there's other monks that would, okay, follow the rules, do this, do that, and they had no awareness of my energy healing abilities, whereas these other monks were very conscious and very aware of it. That's how I started to notice who is an enlightened monk, and who is not. One thing I learned over the years, not all monks are these great spiritual healers and consciousness and awareness beings. Some of them are just there following the rules. You know, they don't quite have it yet. Maybe they will. I think some never do. There's some monks for years that I went to temple that they just never had the ability, but they were very impressed and also very respectful by the monks that did. So the young man who was questioning me and trying to, hey, do you know this? Do you know this? Well, what about this or that? I realized he was testing me. And it was, now I've had this happen before in temple, and it really was, I was like, wow, this is exactly like being in the Christian church. Well, Matthew, chapter 2, verse 3 says blah, 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 blah. It's like a competition, right? And that is not what it's about. It's about understanding and consciousness. So for some people, it's a competition of who has the most memorized verses, and thus they're more spiritual than you are because they're better than you. So my experience with Buddhism had nothing to do with a religion. So if you ask me about the religious side, I'll be honest with you, I know very, very little. My experience is going to temple and doing energy healing and doing consciousness work and meditating with the monks and working with the monks, etc., etc. Sure, Buddha Calm, Buddha Chandi gave me books to read about Buddhism, and I'll be honest with you, they're pretty long books, pretty thick, and I only read about 10% of each of the books. I was like, yeah, not really, not really into that side. Maybe I should be, but my journey was really learning from a first-hand experience. Because I wanted to really, really know if this stuff was real versus someone taught it to me and therefore like, well, how do I know if it's real? It's not all in my mind because someone said so. So I remember someone encouraged me to go to temple, like you really should go, because they'd seen me with the monks quite a bit. And I think it was a young lady, if I remember right. And it's like, okay, I'll go. And I showed up and I was one of the last people there, and they kind of got started a little bit, probably a few minutes before I got there. And I was like I began to notice, here's what it is. Okay, so in the very beginning, because the monks were so spiritual and did these amazing energy healing things, or I really should say at the time, Buddha Calm, I was impressed. I was like, wow, this is like a spiritual religion. And I assumed, well, so are the people. I assumed every person that was Buddhist was very conscious and aware of energy and energy healing and you know, like I would be able to say like, oh, the house is going to burn down within a week and, you know, stuff like that when I was going through this awakening, and it did. And I did a lot of things during the 6-month period of time, and my girlfriend didn't seem shocked or scared. She was Laotian, and it kind of was like, and I looked at her like, well, why are you just okay with all this? She's like, I don't know, I mean, I grew up with it. She was blessed to have came from the village where Buddha Calm came from, so she grew up with Buddha Calm as her family monk. I mean, ever since she was a baby, right? And so Buddha Calm was one of the most powerful monks I've ever met. In fact, he became the, what do they call him, the head monk of the entire Northern California Laotian temples all over Northern California. And so very respected, very well respected, you know. And so she grew up with that. That's all she knew. So it was kind of like, well, this is kind of how I grew up. So one of the things I noticed is that people that grew up in villages, especially small villages away from the city or the big cities, is they were much more spiritual than people in the city. Okay, the city people tend to be more logical, regardless of what country you go to, especially if it's a big industrial business type city. It's more left brain, it's more logical. Those people tend to be more rule oriented, religious people, regardless of what country you're in. So because of my girlfriend being from the village, and I'd never met anyone from the city in her country or Thailand, etc. yet, I just assumed all Buddhist people were like this. Okay. So I went to temple a few times, and I mean literally a few times. I think when I mean temple, I mean when everyone goes, okay? Because normally I went during the week when just the monks were there. Somebody would walk in with a problem or, you know, like that. So it was very, very, very few people there, the monks, the nuns, and, you know, the younger monks who were becoming monks, etc. And then every now and then someone would walk in crying because someone died or because they need to be healed or whatever. So I spent a lot of time with the monks learning from them, whereas most of the people, they just went to the temple. Very, very few people. Now, the temple was packed. I was like, wow. I mean, it was packed all the way to the door. Like, it was full. And I was like, well, I haven't seen any of these people in the temple before. I was like, well, because that's the only time they would go. And the funny thing, they all looked at me like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I've been coming to the temple 2-3 times a week for years. So what I finally learned and I finally understood was there are religious people who follow the rules, who aren't connected, who aren't open. And then there are spiritual people who are open and understand. It's all about the spiritual side of it. I think I picked this song because the name of the song is Traveler by Punch Deck. And it's essentially, it is like a traveler taking a journey, because it's like you're on this journey to awaken, to open up again, because you were open before, you just forgot. So my answer is, am I Buddhist? I'm spiritual. One note I want to give you is Jesus is the religion of Buddhism is one of their top 5 great teachers. That is an honor. He's like literally up there with the very best. Yes, when Jesus disappeared at about the age of 12, I think it was 11 or 12 when you last heard from him in the Bible. And then later he came back when he was, I think it was 28 years old. It says he came from the East. Well, what's the East from the Middle East? Well, that's India, Burma, and the Southeast Asia area. Okay, so now watch this. So if you've studied energy healing, like Reiki and some other things, you'll be like, wait a minute, that's what Jesus said. I'm like, yeah, exactly. And another thing is when you start studying Buddhism, you're like, wait a minute, Jesus said that. So one of the things that was the whole look within, internal awareness, like, wait, that's what Jesus was saying. And I kept having these realizations, and I finally said to a monk one day, I'm like, well, that's what Jesus said. And he said, well, yeah, he is one of our top 5 great teachers. And I was like, what? And then he sat me down and talked to me for an hour about it. All right, so you know how we've talked about the either-or mentality, how someone is so extreme it makes them a narcissist? Well, that's the same thing when you say, well, it's either my religion or your religion. Which one's the best? That is a complete competitive competition thinking, which is the left brain. Right or wrong, either or. Either you're right or I'm right. We can't both be right. So one of us is right and one of us is wrong. No. The whole goal of all of this is to get people to become conscious and aware, to become more spiritual, okay, this is my point. To have a relationship with God like Jesus did. So one day when I went to temple, this is when I was going through that huge 6-month awakening, Buddha Calm had set me down with a young monk, probably about 23, 24, not too much younger than me. I was about 28. And I don't remember exactly what we were saying, but we happened to have an incense near us, and the smoke was floating up. And I said, no, it's like this. And I put my finger in the middle, and I did an opening the way I would open someone's chakra. And I began to circle the smoke counterclockwise as if you're opening up, say, a bottle, like a bottle cap. And I was talking about how it expands and expands and expands, and you completely let go. So he looked at Buddha Calm like, wait, what? Is that right? And Buddha Calm goes, yeah. And he looks at me, and then out of nowhere, I think it was his ego. He was a young guy, and he said, well, don't you believe that Buddhism is better than Christianity? And I looked at him, and I was kind of like what? And he was really adamant. He was kind of pushy, very pushy, actually. And I looked over at Buddha Calm, and Buddha Calm came over and said, no. And the monk goes, well, why is he telling me this stuff? And Buddha Calm goes, no, you're not here to teach him. He's here to teach you. And that young monk, he was like, what? Because he'd only been in the temple. I'd been as a monk for about a year. Anyways, Buddha Calm then goes, he knows. Now, for those of you who truly are empaths, I want to share something with you which you may not have realized. You know, we talk about the Bible and the stories in the Bible, the book of Genesis, the serpent, or the book of Daniel, you know, how his brothers took him and sold him into slavery into, Egypt. And God, you know, basically used him to speak to the Pharaoh, and just, it was like, you know, and how he became very successful in the Pharaoh, or I think it was Pharaoh. Forgive me for having the tech. See, I'm not really good. I don't like technical stuff at all. I like understanding better. So I might have I get the word David mixed up with the name Daniel all the time. I've always done this since I was a kid. In fact, I just Googled it. I actually got it completely wrong. It was Joseph. So Joseph was sold into slavery. Genesis 37:18-36 says Joseph was sold into slavery. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. So here's my point, or my purpose, is these stories in the Bible are about you. You know, it was the book of Job where Job suffered tremendously, you know, I mean, just everything. And you start to realize, and then God gave him back his wealth and, you know, everything else. And so he was just loyal and faithful to God no matter what God put him through. So you look at this, and Joseph, like Joseph became this great leader in a foreign country that he was sold into slavery, and he became the finance minister, and because he was really good with money, he was really good with numbers, right? So he designed and developed the whole tax system, and he was a prophet. God told him, go tell Pharaoh, you know, there's going to be a famine to save up, you know, lots of grain for so many years. I don't remember how many years it was, 2 years or 5 years or 8 years or whatever. And because of that, the Pharaoh was really impressed with him, and he put him ahead of the finance, and he became a leader, and he even had a stamp that he got to use where he had authority. If I remember right, he may have been the second most powerful person in the land of Egypt. So he became this extreme extremely powerful person, and his brothers come back and they're begging Pharaoh, you know, for grain and wheat and all that stuff. And then Joseph, like, I think he had like a mask on or some kind of costume or something. They didn't know it was him at first. And then he put something inside the grains of sack, and when they found, they're like, "Oh my God, the Pharaoh's gonna kill us," because it was like as if they stole something, but they didn't. And then he did have his brothers arrested and brought him back, and then he started to cry. And they basically begged him and said that they didn't steal it, they don't know how it got there, and he cried and he revealed himself. So, one of the lessons of that story, and this really isn't about the lesson of the story, but it's really to say something else, which I'll get to in a second, is he suffered tremendously. His own brothers tried to kill him, then they sold him into slavery, and he became this powerful person in a foreign land, etc., etc. And so it really, you start to look at these stories and you're like, well, wait a minute, I've actually gone through something very similar to that. And this is what the lesson that I'm trying to share with you is: these stories in the Bible are about you. See, the reason why I understand some things that you don't is because I actually went and studied things that you were forbidden to study, that you were told is wrong. Like, one of the things I did that I constantly heard from church people, Christians, was meditation is evil, it's wrong, it's bad. And yet, if you read the Old Testament, if you don't believe me, do it yourself. Write down every verse where God says to meditate. Meditate upon these words. Meditate upon these words. Meditate upon this. Meditate, meditate, meditate. So I went to my pastor, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, why is everyone saying that meditation is wrong? God says himself to meditate. And Pastor Rex goes, Michael, how many times have I told you to stop listening to people in the pews? They're still supping from their mother's teat. They're not eating the meat of the Bible. They're not digging deep. They're not looking deep like you are. So I started to meditate a lot. And because of that, I began to understand things even more that the average person wouldn't understand. Now, when I say meditate, I meditated for a long, we're talking over a decade before I even took one day off. I didn't miss a day. Now, I started off, my goal was an hour. Okay, I didn't quite get there until 3 months later, something like that. And then I could do an hour, and then it was a little more, then it was a little more. And then I was doing hours, and then it would be like 1 hour in the morning, 2 at night. And then it got to, on the weekends, I would meditate for 3 or 4 hours, and it just grew and grew and grew until, the meditation guided me into how to meditate better. And then it guided into, I started, not craving certain heavy foods and sugar and stuff like that. And my diet changed. I didn't even, see, a lot of people, where'd you learn this? And I didn't. It just kind of something in me changed. So when you meditate, it will guide you. I don't know how to explain this. You just crave different foods. You don't want to do certain things anymore. You just change. You begin to shift. And then it guided me to this 14-day. Now, it wasn't like, okay, you're going to meditate for 14 days all day long. No, it wasn't like that. It was just like one day I was like, I can't do this anymore. I have so much anxiety. I've got to stop it. I got to fix it. And I just meditated all day long, and I made a commitment. I'm going to do this until it's gone. Absolutely no food at all until I had my awakening. And when I had my awakening, not only was it life-changing, but it wasn't until years later when I reflected back, oh, that's what Jesus did. He drew a circle in the sand and told God, I'm not leaving here until. So what I'm saying is I began to have these understandings through actual personal first-hand experience. Another thing is I began to study energy healing. I wanted to find out about this. And so from Buddhism to energy healing to meditating for, 12 years without taking a break, etc., I began to understand what Jesus was saying because I was going through the same experiences, especially the awakening. So all of a sudden when I'd be reading the Bible and it's like, oh, that's what Jesus meant. It became crystal clear. And I'm going to share some of those right now. So a lot of you, well, probably most of you, were just flat out lied to. And I don't even think it was, I don't even think the people that did it purposely or viciously, or it was really just because they didn't know. And they didn't know that they didn't know. They were left-brain beings in the box. Got to follow the rules. Got to do what you're told. It's either this or that. They're wrong. They're sinners. They're going to hell. It's either or. Either you're going to hell or they are going to hell. So they're the ones because they're bad. Because they're different than us and we're right and they're wrong. That mentality is such a childish mentality. When you awaken, you will look back at thinking like that and be ashamed of it. And I don't necessarily think you're going to be ashamed, but you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. You argued and fought about the dumbest things. When you have that very, very conscious moment with God, there is no right or wrong. There's just consciousness. There's just expanded space, expanded energy, and creation. That's all it's about. Again, the Bible is talking about you, the book of Genesis. There was the void, there was nothing, and God said, let there be light. And Shazam, there was light. Jesus Christ's very own story is your story. He suffered tremendously. And yet at the other end, there's liberation, and that's what this is all about. So, if you have to be religious, disciplined to the maximus religious, to where just one day you just lose it and you have a nervous breakdown and you just, I can't do it, and you just completely let go. And then you awaken. That's why you had to go through the religion. That's why you had to go through the discipline. That's why you had to follow the rules to the nth degree, because it would push you over the edge, and that was the whole purpose of it. Whatever it took to get you to the other side to open up. See, it's almost as if it's a game or something, because when you were a little child, I'm kind of giving it away right now. You were wide awake. You were completely conscious. All you did was absorb information, awareness, noticing people, things, feeling energy. That when you were a child, you felt everyone's energy. You were completely conscious. And then society said, okay, now you got to go to preschool, you got to follow the rules, you got to do as you're told. And it slowly started to build a structure around you and got you stuck into this little tiny box. And it completely limited you and shut you off from your true power, your emotional, creative, spiritual power. This is who you truly are. So in the Bible, it says that Jesus is going to shock a lot of you. I'm kind of surprised a lot of Christians don't know this. But it says that Jesus was called the morning star. Do you know what the morning star is? Have you ever heard of the name Lucifer morning star? Yep, the devil himself. Now hold on, it's okay, you'll see. Because I'll be honest, when I first read it, it scared me. So I'm going to give you some verses here so you can look it up yourself. One of the first ones is, the morning star as an individual is in Isaiah 14:12. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You once laid low the nations. NIV. The King James Version and New King James Version both translate morning star as Lucifer, son of the morning star. Okay. It is clear from the rest of the passage that Isaiah is referring to Satan's fall from heaven, Luke 10:18. So in this case, the morning star refers to Satan. In Revelation 22:16, Jesus unmistakably identifies himself as the morning star. Why are both Jesus and Satan described as the morning star? Okay, let me scroll down. It is interesting to note that the concept of the morning star is not the only concept that is applied to both Jesus and Satan. In Revelation 5:5, Jesus is referred to as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. In Peter 5:8, Satan is compared to a lion seeking someone to devour. The point is this: both Jesus and Satan to a certain extent have similarities to lions. So essentially, here's the difference. Okay, there's a main difference. I'm going to go second. So the first one is this: Satan is essentially a being that just wants to destroy without any good intention, whereas Jesus comes along and can destroy, but he ends up, he's the bright morning star. So here's the real difference. Satan is still the morning star. Jesus is the overcomer. He became what I'm going to state. I don't remember if this is the exact words, but when I looked into the definitions through the King James Bible Word Book, etc., and the concordance, is Jesus overcame. So he came in the flesh, in the being, with a reptilian brain. And what happened was he overcame the ego. He overcame the reptilian flesh way of being. So he is, another word you could put is, he's the overcomer. So he overcame the ego, the desire to kill, the desire to hurt, the desire to fight. He became the overcomer. It's like he let go of that and became very conscious. Now let me explain my experience. So when I went through that period of time where I meditated for 14 days and I became very conscious, everything shifted. Something was different at the time. I was like, I didn't know what was going on. It was like nothing but peace and love and harmony. Even for people who would be mean to me or had bad thoughts of me or anything like that, there was just this sense of, I guess, I want to say compassion, but I think beyond that, a sense of consciousness and awareness. Now, from this point forward, whenever I'd meditate and really drop down inside, it's like you shift. That's the best way to explain it. It's like you shift from this world where you're worried about things and you get hurt and you're angry, you're up, you're down, and you're emotional, to consciousness. Like it's completely different. It's a completely different way of experiencing the world and life. So in this sense, for at least 6 months during my awakening, I was in this space. This is the overcomer, okay? Now, Jesus, what I believe the difference is, so when I meditate now, if I do it long enough, I can enter that space, boom, in 15, 20, 30 minutes. Maybe even sooner, okay? But I believe Jesus got to the point where he was just at that space at all times. In that sense, I would say he's the complete overcomer. It's like when you meditate, you get these ideas and thoughts, you start to think, and then you let it go, and you let it go to, see, you will come to a space of nothingness. And in this space, you can create anything. It's exactly like the beginning of the book of Genesis when, I forget the exact word, but I think it was like, it was the void and the whatever. There was nothingness, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. God said, let there be an earth, and there was earth, let there be this, and it was just creation from thought. Because it came from nothingness. There was no thinking at all. So the opposite of consciousness is thinking, like you're closed up in your forehead, in your mind. That's narrow, where you completely let go of that, and then from that point is, how do I explain this? It's like you imagine what you want, poof, it happens. And so consciousness is when you enter the space of nothingness. No feelings, no thought, nothing. And it is a really peaceful, very wonderful space to be in. The funny thing is it's not boring at all. It is once you access that again and again, you become addicted to it. So I ended up meditating for 12 years straight before taking a break. I lost a lot of weight. I lost a lot of muscle. I became fairly thin because I had no interest in the world. I became a vegetarian for 3 years straight. I mean, no eggs, no milk, no cheese, nothing. Pure vegetarian. So all I want to say is that you are a creator. When you enter this space of absolute nothingness, it's the equivalent of a blank canvas so an artist can paint a new art piece. So when people start talking to me about what year was Buddha born, how many Buddhas were there, I have no idea. I really don't care. That has no interest with me. I'm only interested in consciousness. And in consciousness, there is no religion. There's no rules. When you're in this space, you have no intention of hurting anyone at all. It's just pureness. It's like pure love. I don't know how to explain it. It's just pure love, pure compassion. You don't feel sorry for people. That's not, I don't know, you know what, you have to experience it in order to truly understand it. It's like you want people to be happy. There's a sense of someone's in pain. You want to alleviate their suffering. You know, I'm going to say it like this. Consciousness is the most amazing thing in the world. It's pure peace. It's you know what the word is? It's nirvana. It's like there's no... I can't, I can't put it in the right words, but I'm going to put it in the best I can using words. It's like there's no emotions, there's no feelings, yet it's the greatest feeling in the world. So here's the difference. Consciousness is energy expanded, where the molecules have plenty of space. Whereas lack of consciousness, the opposite, thinking, it's concentrated energy, it's heavy, it's dark, it's dense. So it's the difference between dense energy and the opposite of dense, like complete expansion, a complete wide open, pure space. It's pure bliss. It's heaven. Hey, God bless you guys. Thank you for listening to this video. If you enjoyed this video, please click subscribe, click the like button, go ahead and make a comment. And if you like, you can go ahead and make a donation. There's a PayPal link right there in the description box. God bless you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.